What today is? It's a Wednesday.
It's Tuesday.
What's that? Is it Tuesday?
It's Tuesday.
Hey, I don't even know what day it is. I'm thinking about Wednesday though.
I hear you.
Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Hey folks, welcome to Making Data Simple. So here's the theme of this podcast. A couple of weeks ago, we had a podcast on coaching. And this is kind of a follow-up to that, where it's a long story short, just talking with Katie. I don't know how I agreed to this, but I'll give some of my insight on coaching. One of many, do with it what you will, but also talk to Katie about her ambitions on coaching, what she's looking for, that kind of thing. And maybe the community, you listeners, can benefit from that. Take it for what it's worth. But before I do that, here's what we'll do. I want to talk to Katie a little bit. We're going to start there, and then we'll see where it goes. So, Katie, welcome to the podcast. Katie McLuckie, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. We've been working together on a lot of client situations and partnerships that have been working out really well. You're doing a great job. Can you introduce yourself, if you would? I do that for everybody that joins the podcast. I want to do it for you as well. You've got a kind of interesting history that I've got a few questions on already because I know some things, but I'm going to let you introduce yourself first and we'll go from there.
Like you mentioned, we've been working with some clients together over the last year. I know you longer than you've known me, but if I introduce just from this show, but if I introduce myself, I cover the data platform for IBM for one of our enterprise clients, and you and I have been driving some compelling innovation, right? So I've been with IBM for 5 years. I was with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise prior to that in storage, and then VAR before that. So I really came from the smiling and dialing, as many of us have.
But what's your history? I was talking to a customer the other day, and I was like saying, hey, I want the good stuff. So give me the good stuff.
I went to University of Illinois. I graduated with urban planning, and then I went on to grad school at Notre Dame for executive business MBA. But at the heart, I'm a small town girl. Grew up in a small farm town in Coal City, Illinois, where my husband and I are both from, actually. We've been friends since we were like 3 years old. Yep. So we live about an hour south of Chicago. And I think if I go back to where I don't think it's a coincidence that I ended up in data. I did start with going towards architecture when I was a kid. I mean, I remember my teachers when I was young having to help me like spell architect on the what do you want to be when you grow up, you know? And then going into high school, I really got into AutoCAD, which sounds so nerdy, but I really got into it and ended up having an internship in high school as a drafter at a local engineering firm, which is probably what got me into U of I. It's a little different of usual high school kid experience. And then when I got to U of I wanted to get into politics a bit, and engineering was not that. So I learned about urban planning, which was kind of like the perfect mesh of politics and engineering. And so that drove me to move out to DC, where I worked for one of the senators on the Hill for a while. And it was all politics. Then I moved home, graduated college, took a risk on a smiling and dialing VAR in Chicago, competing with like CDW, where many of us also started, and moved over to the OEM world at HP. Then IBM recruited me, and I've been here 5 years. I came in January of 2020. So,
were you going to go work for the government at one point when you went to the Senate?
Yeah, I got to work for the Senate Majority Whip, right? He was the number 2 senator while I was out there. I got so much exposure, which if you're going to fall in love with DC, having that high level exposure it's kind of hard not to. But I came back to graduate and just kind of figured that politics would be there if I wanted that route. And I had a successful, I don't know if you're familiar with the painting companies that college internships have. It's like College Pro Painting or College Works Painting. They literally teach you to run a painting like team. Sherwin-Williams authorizes these painters, and then you go knocking door to door. I've got the newspaper clippings to prove it, unfortunately. And then you build this team, and I was really successful that summer. So then it made me kind of attractive for a sales position.
Look, you didn't even hit this one. What is this about? You traveled the world snowboarding.
Yeah. So my husband and I have been snowboarding together since we were teenagers. We were the same kind of group of friends. It's kind of hard not to be when there's 200, not even 200 people in your class. But yeah, we've been snowboarding since we were kids. I've gone with my dad out west every spring break when my kids were or when my friends were going to like Florida. My dad and I were going skiing out west. So when my husband and I started dating, that's the first thing we started doing was snowboard trips. We go to Jackson Hole every year, Big Sky. And then for our honeymoon, we went to Argentina in Patagonia snowboarding. And then a few months later, we went to Japan snowboarding.
Wow. So if you have a choice between going to a vacation of warm weather or cold weather, what are you going to choose?
Definitely snow. Good snow, definitely snow.
Really? That's different.
I mean, you have to escape Chicago sometimes in the winter, but definitely snow.
Kidding. I would think that you'd be like, I'm done with this. I'm done with it right now. I don't want anything to do with snow anymore. Like I used to ski. That's what I thought. I mean, I just like, man, I'd rather be on a lake skiing if I'm going to do that or something. But respect. So you must be pretty good then.
I can hold my own. It doesn't feel like I'm as good as I used to be when I'm as sore as I am after, but
to make the transition, look, I think you should be giving lessons on breaking down doors. I didn't think I had a choice when we went and visited your client and the podcast, everything else like this. You find your way, and I've seen you. The way you work the room is pretty impressive. Good for you. Continue to do that. That's how you progress and how you drive career path. But speaking of driving career path, we had this session a couple of weeks ago on coaching, business coaching particularly. You had an interest there. What are you thinking in terms of coaching? Are you looking for a coach? Are you trying to find a coach? Are you trying to figure out how to go about the process? Where's your mind at?
I am looking for an executive coach. I've had mentors forever. God bless. I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for mentors who really get you to see the art of the possible in yourself, right? But at some point, I think that we graduate to needing outside counsel, right? Whether your mentor the experience varies too much, or maybe they're not at the same company anymore, or maybe you have personal variables that are affecting your workplace and you want to have someone to kind of bounce off how advise you how you would handle that, right? So that's where I'm at. And I think that when your clients and your peers and your superiors, I mean, when people start really validating what you're doing and that you're on the right path, that's when I really started to think, okay, it's time for me to get an executive coach.
It's so funny to me that people consider themselves at the top of their game, and many of them don't have coaches. And to me, I don't see how both possible. Again, I think the sports analogy is something that everybody can relate to. If we didn't have team coaches and the players just did their own thing, people would say, what the hell? How could you be professional and not have a coach? So what kind of coach are you looking for? Do you need help in the process? I mean, what are you thinking in terms of finding that coach?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about, right, is what was your experience finding a coach? When did you self-evaluate and determine that it was time to have an executive coach? I know sometimes companies make that decision when you get into leadership, right? They guide you there, but I'm curious what your journey was.
I think, first of all, you've got to be willing to be vulnerable first. And I think when I first started my career, perhaps it's that I wanted to emphasize the fake it until I make it or something, and I wasn't as vulnerable. The more you work and the more leadership that you're asked to take on, the more you identify with being humble, being vulnerable, putting the best people around you. And when you do that, you figure, look, I'll I'll share my weaknesses with a coach, whatever, because I want to better them or I want to minimize them and accentuate my strengths. Many years ago, I took on a coach, but I've had a lot of not so good ones. My best advice to you and the coach that I have now came through word of mouth. You start talking to people that you respect, that you know are good leaders. A lot of times, if they're really good leaders, they'll have a coach. Sometimes I've had multiple business coaches at the same time, by the way. But the best coach that I have is been referred to me through someone. There's a lot of people out there that say they're coaches. That's what I would warn you on. Like over COVID, I saw like everybody that was out of a job just put title coach and then tried to get some added side hustle money for being a coach. I think you've got to look at their credentials, but more importantly, you've got to look at their experience. The coach that I have now, she is actually retired. She's doing it almost as a favor, but she actually worked for Franklin Covey. So, I mean, she's got the credentials. She reported directly to Stephen Covey, and he's written many, many books, but Seven Habits, book, for example, is one. She's got a lot of stories. By the way, she didn't agree with him on everything.
My kind of girl.
Yeah. But you can tell she's a great coach just by one, she'll use tools to assess your behaviors and different things like that. So you get to know yourself a little bit better and how collaborate or lead other people that are very different than you because they'll have different behaviors. And it's just make you think about things differently. Once you get that, and she's got a lot of business experience, then it's like a book hard to put down. That's what I would say.
It's interesting because one of my questions was about like what the culture is with coaching in the sense of like sharing within peers. You know, I wondered if it was something where when you have like, is it a business card that you share? You know, like is it best for your coach when you introduce them to others and kind of like broaden their clientele? I didn't really know how that worked, but it makes sense when you have a high profile coach like that it doesn't work that way. But yeah, that's where I'm at, is starting to just have those conversations with like trusted superiors, I guess, that I know that have coaches and start talking to them. So I guess I'm kind of just organically following into that path of gaining advice from peers who I know have coaches. To your point, the certified professional coach is one of the main certifications, right? You want to like watch for. My mentor from when I first joined the VAR, when I just got into tech sales, he has now retired and turned into a certified professional coach. But I think that the personal relationship is too much for me to be able to really utilize him from an executive coach perspective now. So that's kind of where the path that I'm on.
I think there's probably many paths you could take, but there are some business coaching companies like Better Up and others. And look, they're good coaches and they do it every day. I mean, multiple times a day. So they're going to have experience and suggestions that can make you think differently and help accelerate your capabilities in leadership and innovation, whatever you want to call it. I just tend to prefer one specifically because it's become very personal. She has experience that I think others don't have. I mean, it's all about that experience, right? The other thing is she is retired. I think maybe that gives her a little bit of I don't care attitude. She has a way of really making me listen and putting it into terms I understand. I mean, I don't know if I told you this before, but it's a relatable concept. It's very silly, but it's an example of like you could bring a business problem, any kind of very tough business problems, and you're thinking, take a fork in the road to the left, and by the end of the conversation, she'll have you thinking, I got to go right. And an example that we relate to everybody is I take this trip to Napa every year with friends, and we spend too much money on wine. And I'm pretty conservative that way. I don't like how much money we're spending on wine, and it really drives me crazy. So in one session, somehow we got off on a tangent, and I was like, yeah, I'm never going back to Napa again. She was probing and prying, and I was like, look, it's ridiculous. This is grape juice. I'm not doing it. I mean, do I enjoy it? Yeah, sure. Is it good wine? It's fantastic wine. But that's ridiculous. I can drink water. I'm just as good. I'm not spending my money like that. And she's back and forth and going like this. And then pretty soon she goes, you know what? Are you sure you're buying wine? I said, what? She goes, are you sure you're buying wine? And I was like, what do you mean I'm buying wine? I told you I just bought like how many cases of wine? Is ridiculous. You get caught in the moment. I buy all this wine. I come back. I go, what did I just do? She goes, hold on a second. I'm asking you a question and you're not answering me. Are you sure you are buying wine? And I'm like, I thought I was buying wine. What am I buying? And she goes, look, you're not very smart today. I think you're buying, and I would ask you to consider the fact that you're buying an experience. And I said, I could tell, she's gonna mess with my mind again. And she goes, look, what do you do with that wine? And I said, what do you mean what I do with the wine? I come home, I drink it. Do you drink it with friends? Yeah, I drink it with the same friends we went out there with. Who are those friends? Well, I got a couple of CEO friends. We go out there. She goes, well, you talk business? Yeah, well, we business and stuff, but we're friends. Okay, that's fine. You come back, you meet every month. Yeah, how long does that last? Well, a year, 2 years. We use all this. Of course, we go back the next year. She goes, do you ever buy wine again? Sometimes, but usually we got enough wine from when we went to Napa. She goes, you're buying an experience is all I'm saying. Now, I want you to look at that experience. Did you eat dinner when you do this wine? Yeah, we all make dinner. We go to each other's houses. I said, I don't think you're buying wine at all at this point. And then she went back and forth. I mean, by the time she goes, now, all I'm asking you is you gave me a dollar figure. Now, is it worth the experience? I'm like, it might be worth the experience. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't tell me you're buying wine anymore. But that's an example of just think of a business problem. Obviously, you don't share anything confidential, but you share a different business problem and you think you've got a solution. You come out of there energized, thinking in a completely different way than when you went in with it. It gives you energy. And you kind of curse her as you're walking out the door, but you're like, man, ridiculous. But she's right. And, I want to think differently because we get stuck. We're very, very biased. Our brains, I think, are naturally wired, and studies show this, that we'll take the easiest answer. The fastest answer that you can get doesn't even necessarily mean it's right, but you'll go with that unless you get challenged or you're going to do something different. And that's what a coach does. Anyway, that's my long story. Sorry. There you go.
I've thought about that since you told me that story. I mean, maybe I'm using it to justify buying what I want, but because it's for the experience, right? But no, I've thought about that before. And when I knew that it was time for me to get an executive coach is when it feels like my peers and my superiors and my friends or whomever are talking about my potential. I've talked to you about this too. I think I need someone's opinion for my road to get there. I need someone to help guide me. I think I know what I'm doing is right. And like you said, I mean, I'm very confident in how I approach people and things like that, but I don't want to be ignorant to the fact of the world that I'm in and where I'm going. I've never been before. And I don't want to enter that thinking fearful that I've never been there before, because it's not that. When I get an opportunity to take a step up, it's exciting. It's like, I've never been here before. We had the motivational speaker last week. And it really resonated. When I get challenged, I get excited. And when I get excited, I may think that I am convinced that the path that I'm on is right or that I'm handling the situation the best way. But I think a coach would help me, like you said, broaden my perception to other solutions or other paths to get there.
You already know my opinion. I think you should find a coach. I think you will benefit from a coach. I think if you have the right coach, what will end up happening is you won't even question the dollars you're spending. They can get a little expensive. I would still continue with the mentors. I look at mentors in multiple ways. You shouldn't have one. You could have 10 as far as I'm concerned. I think you should have a number of mentors, but I think there are different types of mentors. Maybe a technical mentor if you want to be technical. There's a career mentor that'll help you around thinking about how to navigate your career. Maybe you have a more of a career strategic, like a strategic mentor. So what's that? That's finding somebody that'll mentor you in a place maybe that you want to be. And if they're successful at being a mentor, they help you get to that place. That's why I call it strategic. So I would keep those going as well. But I'd also have the business coach that'll really help you, with some of the decision points that you're making. I mean, leadership, is, particularly people leadership, but leadership is very, very tough. Why wouldn't you have a coach? I don't know if my coach works because she is retired. Every time I say, how about, she goes, I'm retired. I'm like, okay. Wouldn't you want to have one more client? She's like, no, I'm retired, sitting on a beach right now. Why would I want another client? She's really good. She's very direct too, but that's the kind of person I need.
Maybe we'd get along, right? Yeah.
You probably would. She doesn't mess around. we have good, candid conversations about a lot of different things. Like we get into silly arguments. Like I still mow my yard. Well, when I can, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
It's an action where you get to see the results of that action. It's kind of mundane. And I'm usually listening to something while I do it or something. She's like, you're wasting your time. Like, why?
Your Midwest is showing.
See? Although she would say if you really enjoy it, fine. But would you be better off coding a next bot or something? And if you would, that's what you should be doing. Like I say, she gets you to think differently. And then I do. Sometimes I do what she says. Sometimes I don't. It doesn't matter. So I would seek counsel from those you trust, see if you can find some recommendations. I would at least try the big corporate coaching programs. The advantages that they have, because they have a lot of coaches on staff and they're a company of coaches, like you said earlier, they have a lot of motivational speakers.
This is helpful. I mean, even just your concept on the different kinds of professional coaches, right? Strategic. I mean, I think I'm naturally going that way, but technical, that's just something I never really thought about. I mean, I get the overload of it with our tech sellers and that side of things. But as I go down my career as a AI sales specialist, right? I don't want to say tech sales because I'm not a tech seller, but I am a technical seller anyway. Your acumen grows. My acumen grows. I become much more of a technical communicator than many of my peers, right? So it's not to be said that I won't choose a career path that goes more technical. So I don't want to exclude that opportunity. And I want to make sure that I'm maximizing my technical acumen as I become more educated in that as well.
I've got a coaching folder, all the things that have helped me be more balanced or rounded. There's the behavior assessments that we talked about earlier. We've done an exercise on what gives me energy, what takes energy away. Personal mission statements, identifying what the perfect position is, what my priorities are in planning, how I'm taking my yearly plans and project planning them throughout the year. Bucket list items, making sure you're also checking off some of your bucket lists. Time boxing, so you get more done and prioritized during the day. Practicing gratitude, outlining your values. Those are all things that I think, just by example, that a coach can help with. You got to find a good coach.
I think it's more helpful than you think. All of that is common sense that is not very common, right? You just don't stop to think about it. So I think if you hold a few of those things close to you when you're making decisions or even when you're communicating with your coach, I think, like I said, I think it's more helpful than you think. Just adapting to that mindset.
If nothing else, if you've got a good coach you can trust, you've got an accountability partner. And it's kind of like if you're going to the gym, it's easy to say, not today.
Yeah.
I'm just too tired. But if I got Katie McLuckie that going to be at the gym, I'm like, oh man, she's already going to be there. I got to go. She's going to give me a lot of ribbing that I didn't attend today if I don't go. Accountability partners are huge.
Yeah. And I mean, I think talking to the listeners, right? I can't be the only person that's in this place in my career, right? So I hope that it can be helpful to others that may not think that they're ready for an executive coach, but just open their mind to...
Let me tackle that real quick because some folks look at it as only for executives. That is absolutely not the case. I think, honestly, if you consider yourself on a professional career journey, you could be coding, you could be selling, you could be in finance, whatever. I think every individual in there should have a coach, to be honest with you.
There's no downside. I mean, I'm excited.
Catherine Main, I brought you back. This is the show after the show. How are you?
I am doing great, Al. I love to be on the show after the show, so I'm really happy to be here.
Let me give you a very quick lead in, and that is a couple weeks ago, a while ago, we did, to start the year, a podcast on business coaching. And nobody better than you to outline business coaching, the priorities, the benefits, and what to think about. As expected, after that discussion, I got a number of LinkedIn hits, a number of internal IBM hits about essentially what it was, okay, you got me and I'm in, but I really don't know how to get started. So as you heard, I had an individual that reached out to me, Katie McLuckie, and she had some of the same questions. And I thought, all right, well, let's just bring you onto the podcast and let's talk about it. We talked about corporate coaching that you can go to, or you got individual coaching. So my question to you is, you heard about Katie, 5 years, she's into technical sales, she's in. What would your advice be for her on grabbing a coach?
Katie is just amazing and a superstar. So I'm so glad she was able to join you on the podcast. I'm really excited about that. I think also, Al, it's been so fun. Some of the feedback I've gotten on the podcast that we did was how impressed people were with your self-reflection and your drive and your passion around this. And they were really inspired by it, right? For a senior leader, I mean, we often think that they know everything, and your dedication and drive to this topic was really inspiring. I got that feedback just today. But it all comes down to, when do you retain a coach and how do you even go about it? We touched on this briefly in the podcast, and it can be a sensitive issue. I would like to normalize it so that it's not, because your family and friends are the best place to start. People who you know, people who you admire, ask them if they have a coach and see if they can retain that person. Now, to your point, I talk about this with my friends all the time, to your point that everybody can call themselves a coach. There's life coaches, there's business coaches, there's corporate coaches, there's every flavor of coach. I think doing a little due diligence around two things. One, the experience you'd like to get out of it and what important adjustments you'd like to make for yourself. So areas of growth, to put it bluntly, what your areas of growth that you think that you have, or what problems you're stuck on. I think that's a good orienting factor. Second, look for that coaching certification and look for that coach's experience. You might have a coach who has a lot of experience in a particular environment, a particular size company, a particular industry, like an HR coach, right? Who might be really good at working and navigating HR environments. So look at the coach. Look for the certification they have, look at the industry and experience they have to see if it aligns with both where you're at and what kind of challenges you'd like to work on. And then look at what sort of methodology and system they use around their coaching experience. I stacked a lot in there. Does that make sense?
No, that's good. That is very good. Whoever called you is giving me a little too much credit, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Let me ask a few follow-on questions. Are you a fan of the corporate coaching firms?
It always comes down to the individual. I've had experiences with corporate coaches that were positive. I had experiences with corporate coaches that weren't very useful for me. So I think the burden on us is to know at least what challenge we're facing right now, so we can do the due diligence to interview the coach, whether it's through corporate coaching or whether it's individual coaching. I really like individual coaching because I know that that person is my advocate. They are solely in my corner. And it's going to perhaps allow for very frank conversations of a different lens in a broader way.
But I presume you may lose some of the economies of scale that like a big firm can provide. Like I was with a firm at one point in time, and they had Prince Harry come in and talk. They had all different kind of people that came in to talk. So, but in terms of the personal one-on-one, not worried about just the next client that you have to go to, that one-on-one does make a difference as well. So I see both sides. Just like you.
Exactly. And I don't think that it helps to set it up as a versus. I think it's an and. If you have access to a corporate coach, use your corporate coach. There is always something more to find and learn, even if it is, this is totally unhelpful because I knew this. How validating is that, right? So it's always useful to get a coach. It's always useful to get more perspective. If we don't have that additional perspective coming in, we can't hope to make a change, or we can't validate what's working for us, which was our conversation last time about leaning into our strengths and minimizing our weaknesses. So for a while, I had my corporate coach and I had my private coach because that's just how things work. So I think it's very valuable. I'm a big fan of it, but I'm also a big fan of being very explicit about what you want to get out of the experience. At the end of the day, no matter whether it's through corporate, whether it's individual, being very clear, even if it's coming forward with a problem statement that says, I'm stuck, I don't know where to start, this is where I think I'd like to go, having something is what's going to make it a powerful engagement.
Are there any red flags? And how do you know when it's time to switch or it's flat out not going to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. because we're talking about vulnerable things, because we're talking about our growth areas. And that can set up a little bit more of a challenging situation to set boundaries. First, any coach that doesn't work with you to set goals up front is not going to be helpful. You have to have goals for the coaching engagement. So that has to be a first thing right up front. You should expect that you're going to have an interview session to just see whether or not there's chemistry there. You can get whether or not there's chemistry in engagements with people, even if it's virtually. Is there chemistry? Do you have goals? And is it very clear and very transparent that there's off-ramps in the engagement? If you don't feel like you're getting what you need out of it, if you don't feel like you're progressing towards goals, there should be an off-ramp for that. That's no harm and no foul, because it could not work on both sides. I know at different points in my life, I've not been very open to coaching. I've been kind of set in my ways, and I'm like, no, I got it. A coach wouldn't benefit from working with me at that time either. And so they would want their own off ramp. So having negotiated off ramps, having those conversations, have regular check-ins and regular points of saying, is this working for us? Do we still feel like we're making progress? Is a best practice that you should look for in your coaching engagement.
Before I let you go, any additional gotchas and or things people may not be aware of or surprises around coaching?
Oh, yeah. I'm just thinking about how I want to say this, because now it's going into the public sphere.
That's for me. I know I've got the right question.
Yeah. For me, if it starts feeling great and it starts feeling like an echo chamber, it's probably not as useful as it could be. I absolutely do not advocate for a relationship where the coach comes in and solely points out the things that you're doing wrong in a harsh, demeaning, or critical way. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you find yourself as the coachee wanting to come in and please your coach, if you find yourself wanting to get validation from your coach that you're doing a good job, some of that is okay. And you're investing your time, your resources into this relationship to get you where you want to go. Which means if you're coming in and getting validated for what you're already doing, you're not getting the perspective and input that's going to get you to where you need to go, right? So one of my favorite coaching books is called Coaching with Backbone and Heart. And that's what I personally look for in a coach. And I look for this in my mentors. I look for this in my very close relationships, is those people who know me and know my gotchas, know where I want to go. And so they help me take things to heart rather than through the heart. But they don't shy away from hard conversations, because sometimes we need to have those reflective moments that might make us cringe a little bit and might make us a little insecure. But we need to have that from a trusted source so that we can be more effective per our last conversation, so we can get to where we want to go. And oftentimes, I think that feedback is really, really difficult. I mean, that's like a leadership 101 that we talk about, that feedback is so hard. Well, if you don't have a coach that's really good at giving you feedback, you're missing out on some major opportunity to make growth happen for you and get you where you want to go.
I do want to ask one follow-up, going back to something you said on the certifications. Is there a specific certification you should be looking for?
There are multitudinous coaching certifications that are out there. The gold standard. Yes. The gold standard is the ICF certification. That's the International Coaching Foundation, I think is what it is. But it's ICF certification, and that's kind of the gold standard for coaching. There are lots of independent coaching programs out there that you can get some sort of certification. But if you look for that ICF, that's usually ironclad and pretty solid gold.
Thank you for coming back and sharing your expertise with us.
As always, this is super fun. I love it. I feel honored and privileged to have the time with you and discuss our favorite topic together. And I look forward to catching you on our next session. That would be great.
All right. Thank you. Listeners, thanks again. Bye-bye.